looking donut. In this case, I grabbed 3, you'll see. Like if you do things repeatedly without, like you want to give emphasis to things. Emphasis, what am I talking about? You want to make parts of it that stand out from the rest. So if you just did like there to there, and then did there to there, and then there to there, and did like dribbles all the way around it in even increments, it would just look fake. So you want to do it kind of randomly. So yeah, somewhere there. I'm sort of picking an area which is like already slightly like pulling down to kind of, yeah, like you're basically you're creating the look of, you know, it was weighty icing, and that part had too much weight to it, and so it actually dribbled down the edge there. So this part here I'll grab as well. I'll grab 3 of these and I'll pull them down. And by the way, I'm using S to scale. So I've got 3 vertices there, and I'm just scaling, right? So this is why it's good to know those hotkeys, G, R, and S that I mentioned at the start there, because it's used everywhere. That's the good thing about Blender, is once you've learned the hotkeys, they are applicable whether you're looking at nodes, whether you're in edit mode, object mode. It's all basically the same. G, R, S. They're kind of everywhere. Unlike the Adobe suite, which has got like Photoshop, After Effects, Illustrator, they've all got like all different hotkeys, and it drives me insane. It's like, you're the same company. Why can't you just like, let's have a company meeting. Let's figure this out. Anyway, Adobe. So I'm going to just keep doing this a couple more times. Yeah, all right. Maybe one more here. 1, 2, 3. That's a little bit too predictable. That's the word I was looking for. Predictable. You don't want it to look predictable, because real dribbling icing would not look predictable. But there we go, right? Okay, so I hope this step wasn't too confusing for you, but even if you can't do the extruding step, it's, you know, it's still going to be okay. You're still going to be all right. Your icing is going to look fine. Really, we're just trying to make it look a little bit more random than just a hat sitting on top. Now, the next step, we will actually do like sculpting, and we will like add in like droplets, like make these things look less weird than they currently do. We'll get to that next. But one final thing before we get to the next part is you'll see that like the edge of this, like drip here, like all the way around it, like it's kind of like it's wrapping into itself, even though I don't think real icing would look like that. Like this part here wouldn't be like a complete glob unless it was like just wet and it just formed. You would see that kind of rolling fall off there. Anyway, what I'm saying is right here on this solidifier thing, we can actually create a crease on the inner part of it, and it will make it look like it's hugging the donut. donut underneath it a lot better. And immediately when you do that, the icing looks just immediately way better. So this video series is brought to you by Polygon. Make better renders faster. Time for something fun. We are going to be I mean, working with a donut should be fun enough. But this part is particularly fun. We're going to be making both the donut and the icing on it look more shapely. So we're going to use sculpting to make this part look gloopy and like real icing, and it's a lot of fun. So before we do the sculpting will it'll work, but the only detail we have is what is available to us in edit mode. Like if we're sculpting on a donut, this is all the detail we have. So really we want to have a lot more detail than what we've got currently. So over here in your modifier section, we've got the subdivision modifier, and there's a button we can apply it. And if we hit apply, it'll apply that detail to our donut. But before I do that, it's a good idea to have a copy of what it is before you're going to apply it, just in case you need to go back. And I say this from like years of using Blender. Like, you know, you hit apply on something, you can't go back, by the way. Like a modifier, it's there and you can revisit it at any time. But once it's applied, it's like it's done. So that's why I think it's a good idea to keep a copy of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both my donut and my icing. I'm going to hit Shift D, and that's created, oh, if you see it snapping like this, by the way, that's because your snapping tool is still turned on. So anyways, I have duplicated it, and you can see up here we've now got 2 donuts and 2 icings. And I'm going to select my donut and my icing, and I'm going to hit M. So M is going to move it to a collection. So collections are at the top here. We can see we've got a collection, just the default collection. So what I want to do is I want to move it to a new collection, and then I'm going to hide that collection. So donut, my donut 001 and whatever, donut icing 001, I'm going to move those to a new collection like this, and I'm going to call this archive. I call it archive just to keep it out of the way. And then I'll call this original, just in case I want to come back to them. And then I'm gonna, on this new collection here, I'm just gonna uncheck that box next to it. So now I've still got my donut and icing, but if I want to, I can access another version of them. So that's just a way, you know, safety precaution for you. Okay, so with my donut here select, this is the one that we're gonna sculpt on first. I'm gonna hit apply on my subdivision. surface. And there we go. We've got all this detail here to work with. So now, if I go to sculpting, so along the top navigation bar there, sculpting, zoom in a bit. Now we've got this. So we are in sculpt mode, and the hotkey you should remember, which has been turned off for some reason, there we go, is F. If you want to change the size of your brush, it is F. F. And there's also like, okay, where's the other settings for your brush? So if for some reason it's disabled, I'm pretty sure like the future version of Blender will have it enabled by default. But if you right click one of these buttons here and then along the header where it says header, just go show tool settings, then you'll actually get the settings that really should be there from the start. So I don't know why it's not there by default, but that's how you bring it in if you can't see it. Anyways, now that I've got this, yeah, I could change my radius there, and I can also change my strength. Hey, thank you for the reminder, Spider. It's always at the wrong time. Okay, now if I was to just draw on my mesh, you can see that we are sculpting. We're pulling parts of the mesh out, but you'll notice we're also pulling another part of the mesh out. The reason for that is that by default, X symmetry mirror is turned on. So it's useful if you're sculpting a face, but we're sculpting a donut, and that's very annoying. So I'm turning that off. And now when I sculpt, you can see we're pulling that out. Now, if I was to go into edit mode just to show you, it's pulled that out. That's exactly what it's doing right now. All it's doing is it's taking the mesh and it is deforming it in a way that's appropriate for sculpting. So you might wonder, well, what's the difference between sculpting and edit mode? I mean, not a lot. Like you could do this next step like in edit mode and do proportional editing and all that kind of thing. But it's just different ways of working. Like some ways, especially when we do like, the deforming of the glooby bits of the icing, it's just easier to do with sculpting. Now, in the case of our donut, what we're going to do is we want to make it look like, because basically the way donuts are made is they come out of a fryer. I actually filmed it. Actually, I went to a donut shop and filmed it, but it comes out of a fryer. Like it sits in a deep fryer and it sits there bubbling, and then they flip it over, and then the other side. But basically, the part that is like floating, like along the level part of the donut, is it's uncooked. It's less cooked than the rest of it, so it's usually like the parts around it are sticking out a little bit more than the middle. So essentially, if I can find a good photo of it, this one, right there, you can kind of see it there. This might actually be a bagel. I don't know what the American Bagel Company is. It might be a bagel, I don't know. But basically, like, the more cooked it is, I believe, the more it'll like build the yeast or whatever, right? It'll kind of expand it a little bit more. Anyways, point is the part around the middle, I want to make it small. I want to make it shrunken a little bit. So if I was to just draw, it's actually going to pull it out. But if I hold down Control as I draw, you can see that it's actually pushing it in. And that is what I want to do. So I'm just going to go around it just like this. This isn't particularly fancy, but it does the job. Yeah. By the way, I'm doing this with a mouse, and I do have a stylus, but I'm doing it with a mouse because I know most people watching just have a mouse. A stylus will be immediately better for sculpting because you have pen pressure, and you can like taper off strokes just with pen pressure. Like, it's so much better with a stylus. So, you know, if you get serious about sculpting or Blender at some point, it's probably a good investment. But I'm doing it with a mouse, so you can too. Okay, so that's okay. But having a look at this, we need a little bit more detail. It's a little bit low res. So I'm going back to layout mode. I'm just gonna add another subsurf modifier. So I'll just add one here. Make sure, when you apply it, by the way, it'll apply whatever is in viewport subdivision, right? So it's just gonna apply that. So I'm just gonna hit apply, and there we go. Got a little bit more to play with now. Back to sculpt mode, and away we go. I did that step deliberately, by the way, because I know, you know, I want to show you like the thought process of how you solve these sorts of problems. So yeah, as you can see, pretty simple. Don't want to go too far, you know. By the way, the keyboard shortcuts like Shift F will actually be the strength. So if you don't want to have to keep going up there, you can just hit Shift F and you can control it there. And then F is the size of the brush. So I use F a lot, Shift F not so much because it's a little weird to me. But yeah, anyway. Yeah, that's pretty cool. We could also change to like a smooth brush. Like if you go too far, you could kind of smooth it out a little bit. Yeah, let's try using Shift F. There we go. Yeah, you can kind of control it like that. But okay, so that is the donut. I might actually just while I'm here, actually let me have a look. I didn't even do this for my my donut. But what does the inside of a donut look like? Nothing. It looks exact. It looks completely perfectly round. Well, you know, nothing's perfect, so I'm gonna just like, I don't know, I'm gonna hold down control, and I'm just gonna like add a little bit of detail here. Like, some detail is better than no detail, right? Even if it's just like a tiny little bit, it's better than it just looking completely perfect, because nothing is completely perfect in the real world. Okay, so the donut part is good. Now, we're going to do similar steps, but for the icing. So I'm going to apply my solidify modifier first. And then the next one is the subsurf modifier. Let me just unhide the rest of the mesh just in case that causes problems later on, because it can. In your sculpt mode, you won't be able to see it. And the other thing, I'm just going to increase my subsurf modifier just to give myself a little bit more detail in the sculpting stage. So I'm applying that to level 3, apply, and now this is the detail level that we have to work with. So I'm going to sculpt mode now, and along my brushes here, the one I'm going to use is called Inflate. And this I'm going to use, the clip start. I believe we did this. Yeah, we did this in the previous tutorial, but changing the clip start, I guess there's a different clip start for different modes. But anyways, so I'm changing that so I can get in close. Inflate will allow me to sculpt, and what it's going to do is it's going to pull, it's going to almost like it's like sticking inside the mesh, and it's like inflating it slightly. And it's going to create a like a dripping effect, which is very, very common for droplets. Like you can see just along that edge there, that's really hard to get there. But basically wherever, there's a better photo maybe, wherever the liquid builds up, like as gravity pulls it down, it's obviously going to be more built up there. So essentially I'm just doing a couple of clicks, obviously clicks. Not clips, to make it look a little bit gloopy. So 1, 2, 3, maybe something like that. This is where you don't copy me exactly. You see what I'm doing, and then you apply it to yours, because just a couple of clips, because your version is obviously going to be different to mine. You're going to have little droplets in different places. So it's just a matter of picking the droplets and just sculpting a little bit of detail. Just make sure that the tip of it, make it look like the weight of it, like it really is like the ball of the dripping icing is like at the head of it, at the very bottom of it, right? The inflate brush is really good for this. It's really handy. I'll do a little bit for this part here as well. It's pretty good. A little bit here maybe. Maybe, I don't know, looks a little bit weird. And you just go along it. It's kind of relaxing. It's quite a fun step. I like this part. You just kind of imitate how liquid forms. Yeah, man, hardcore. Cool stuff. Cool, so that's about that. Now we can switch, of course, to the smooth step. If you go too far, you can like smooth something out if it looks a little bit odd, but that's okay. By the way, the parts that are sticking out, don't worry about that. We'll go back to the edit and we'll move those in, but for now, g'day. If you are new to Blender, this video series is brought to you by Polygon. Make better renders faster. Time for something fun. We are going to be, working with a donut should be fun enough, but this part is particularly fun. We're going to be making both the donut and the icing on it look more shapely. So we're going to displacement across my icing here. Because we got the sculpt brush out, why not, right? Gone to the trouble. trouble of preparing the mesh. So it's never going to be as perfect as that in the real world. So there's going to be parts that are going to have more icing, thicker icing, less than others, etc. So it's just adding in that detail. You can also hold down Control, of course, to go the other direction. And then if you go too far, you can smooth it out a little bit as well. This is, you know, it's getting a painting sort of look to it. But that's kind of cool. It looks a little bit like icing. Okay, so going back to layout mode, you'll see you know, as I mentioned, you've got parts that are like sticking out. Obviously, that's not going to be like that for a, I mean, maybe if it was like frozen in time as the droplet fell, but it's, we want it to stick to the donut. So in edit mode, we have a lot more vertices to play with. And this is, by the way, where it comes to, like, as I mentioned, like you want to have as few vertices as possible whilst you're editing. This is what I mean. Like, this is really hard to control this mesh right now because there's so much going on with it. But as it turns out, we really just need to just like move that part in a little bit. So provided we have proportional editing turned on and we've got it set to smooth, if I grab that little piece there, turn up my proportional editing, and I pull that in. And also I'm going to use rotate, so R to rotate. Why is that turned off? It just randomly turns off the screencast tool so you can't see what I'm pressing, which is annoying. So my apologies if sometimes I'm using stuff on here and the tool is turned off. It's just, it's a little buggy. It's a great add-on, you know, props to whoever made it. It's very handy, but a little buggy. So I'll just pull that in a little bit. There we go. Like that. So you just want to make it look like it's obviously hugging the donut. Like it's really part of the donut. And yeah, just do that for the rest of it. We have gone over though, so we will do that. I will do that off camera. Just continue this for all of the droplets along the thing. Thank you for watching. All right, well, congratulations on making it thus far into the tutorial. The mesh of the donut, like its shape, is pretty well finished. Now we can start talking about lighting and rendering. So everything we have done thus far has just been in sort of viewport mode, right? Like in this shaded, this is solid view viewport mode. But when you actually create a final image, or an animation, it's actually going to be using a separate mode called rendered view mode. And that is where you actually determine how things look, like the color of things, where the light is, all that kind of thing. So that you can actually have a look at by clicking on that final little dot there. That's rendered view mode. Or, by the way, a hotkey for switching between all these modes here is Z, and that'll bring up this pie menu here. So this is solid view, what we've always been looking at, and then that's rendered. We've also got two others which we haven't really used. We'll probably use them later on, but anyways, for now, we're going to have a look at rendered view mode. And this is rendered view mode. Okay, so things look a little different. Not too much different, but a little bit different. One biggest thing is that there's light, right? There's an actual directional light, and we know that that it's working because that's our light over there, right? Now, if we move this light in closer, which we could do just by hitting G and sort of move things around, and I just realized this screencast tool is turned off. Okay, good. Should keep that active. So if we move this light in, just closer to our donut, like so, you can see that as I move this around, that it's the light and the shadow is reflected on that donut there. Okay, so let's make this scene a little more interesting, because right now there's like the donut's not casting any shadow onto anything else because it's just a donut hovering in outer space, basically. So let's add in a plane. Okay, so for some reason, by the way, my cursor, that little cursor, is turned off. This, by the way, it's not important, but this drop down here is how you can determine the look of your viewport, if there's anything to turn on or off. Anyway, the 3D cursor, and the reason the 3D cursor is important is that I'm going to add a plane, and wherever the 3D cursor is where new objects get dropped. And you can can move your 3D cursor by shift right click. That'll change this 3D cursor. Or just shift C will actually clear it and it'll put it in the center of your grid floor. Anyways, so I'm going to add a plane, one thing at a time. Shift A is that menu for adding new things, and we're going to go for mesh plane. And there we go. We have a plane, and I'm going to focus on the plane just so I can move around it. Good. Okay, so I want my donut to obviously be sitting on the plane, so it's like sitting on a counter the top. So we could, grab my donut here and move it up, but then the icing doesn't come with it. And it's obviously very important that these two are linked. We could select them both by hitting shift, and selecting them both like that. But let's save ourselves some time for the future as well and link these two. So we do that by parenting it. So the way you parent things in Blender is you select first the object that is the child of a parent object, meaning like the one that's supposed to follow another object. So the icing first, then shift, click on the object which is going to become the parent, the master object, and then I'm going to hit Control P for parent. And then I'm going to select, you can select object or object keep transform. I always use keep transform, because sometimes if you're working with lots of stuff, the first one doesn't do exactly what you'd expect. Keep transform always works, but basically that. And then when you do that, if you move your donut, you will see that the icing comes with it, which is what we want. Nice. By the way, in your outliner, up here where you've got the objects, when you parent something to another object, it looks as though it's vanished from the outliner, but it's actually just underneath it now. So it's inside the outliner underneath that object above it. Anyway, but now we got that. Now the donut is the master of all, the keeper of light and truth, and the icing is following it. Good. All right, so let's just move this lamp in a little bit closer, like so. Okay. So, why is there no shadow? Why is the donut not casting shadow onto the plane there? Well, we could, with our lamp here selected, we could check it out. Oh, contact shadows. Oh yeah, I've done this tutorial a couple of times. Contact shadows was turned on, but turned off by default. But anyways, it's using this light here, and these are all the settings for the light. Now, we could turn down the strength of this. We could change, how things look, because see, the shadow's not really there. We could turn on contact shadows, which will give a little bit of shadow to it, and that's all well and good. But the thing is that this mode that we're in right now, this render view mode, it's using a rendering engine to present this to us. And the rendering engine that is defined by default in Blender, if we go to the rendering panel up here, the render engine is Eevee, which is a real-time rendering mode. And it's really, really fast renders. Like if you want to do like a long animation, like a TV show, or you're working on a really tight deadline, Eevee is great because it's like really fast, and it's just like Unreal Engine, it's like all those kind of things. It does require a lot of optimization though. Like you've got to really work with light and shadow to try to make it look correct. However, Blender comes with another render engine, Workbench, by the way, forget that. That's just for like viewport. It's very rarely used. Cycles is the other main one. So if we switch to Cycles, it will look like this. Now my recording is going to be slightly screwed up because the device of which it is going to be rendered rendered as by default is set to CPU. I want to change this to GPU, and that's going to use my graphics card. So I've I've got two NVIDIA GTX 1080 Ti's, so it's important that I actually use those because they're way faster than my CPU. If you don't see GPU here, by the way, you can actually go Edit Preferences, and then underneath System, you'll actually show the devices that you have that are compatible with CUDA or OpenCL. OpenCL show the devices. You can actually go Edit Preferences, and then underneath System, you'll actually show the devices that you have that are compatible with CUDA or OpenCL. OpenCL, I believe, is for AMD cards. CUDA is NVIDIA's cards. So you may, depending on your hardware, you may see something here. You might not have anything that's compatible, like CUDA or OpenCL, in which case you're going to have to use CPU. And that's fine. It's just CPU is generally a little bit slower than GPU. So you'll still be able to render. Doesn't matter, but it just might be a little bit slower. Anyways, I'm going to use GPU. Now you'll notice that when we switched from Eevee to Cycles, it looks much more realistic immediately. The shadows are accurate. The shadows are matching the donut here. Everything is working the way you would expect. And that's because Cycles is what's called an unbiased rendering engine, which means it calculates things like physically accurate to the way things are in the real world. It's like throwing light inside the donut, and it's like bounce lighting around inside this ring here. If there was different colors, you would see like light bleed, like it would reflect the light onto other parts of it. These shadows here, they're all accurate. Animated movies like Pixar, Disney, all VFX, everything like that uses render engines like Cycles, unbiased, ray-traced engines. Video games use something like Eevee, although Eevee will not allow you to create a game. It's not a game engine, but the way it functions is very similar. So anyways, a polished, high-quality image or animation, you want to use Cycles. So the one downside to Cycles is that it is grainy. So you'll notice that like as you move around, it's like super heavily grainy, and then it gets less and less grainy as time goes on. And you can actually see in the top left-hand corner, the samples there being counted, so it'll stop at 32, and the higher you set those limits to when we get to that, the less grainy it will become. Anyways, so I know this tutorial, there's not a lot to this tutorial other than explanation, but it's quite important, so I'm spending a whole video just talking about it. But anyways, let's render out like a very simple image. So my camera, the camera is what will actually be defined, like what you will look through when you hit render, like to actually render a final image. So you can actually look through what the camera is seeing by clicking that little button there, or by hitting the shortcut as it's displayed, number pad 0. And there we go. I'm looking through the camera. So we're way, 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 way out there. Now, you can move the camera closer, but you'll notice, like, if you, like, move the view or, like, use the middle mouse or whatever to orbit, you are no longer looking through the camera. So the camera will stay where it is unless you use the controls designed for the camera, which is similar to, like, if you're moving an object. It's G to move that object, and then you use the middle mouse, you push that once, and then you can, like, zoom in. Now, a lot of people from other software and even, like, beginners are like, they find it very weird the way this functions. Other software, it has it so that when you are looking through the camera, if you move the viewport or whatever, the camera will follow with it. So you can actually choose that by clicking lock camera to view in this properties here with the camera selected. And now as I move around, I can use the standard controls, middle mouse, orbit, scroll to come closer, etc., and the camera will follow. So you can use that if you want. Or the other way, by the way, is like, this is the way I like to work. I get my position, like where I want the camera to be like looking, just in like standard view mode like this. And then I hit Control Alt number pad 0. And then the camera will snap to the location that I'm looking at right there. But anyways, I just want to do like a very simple, like this is a full tutorial which will go into like, we'll add brick in the background and coffee and a plate and all that kind of thing. But for now, I just want to have like a very simple look, right, of the donut on a plane. So I've got some light there. So if I was to render this right now, which you can do by going to the top corner and hitting render, or the hotkey is F12. Anyways, when I do that, this will happen. You'll see that it starts, you've got like these little squares that will appear. It'll start in the middle and it'll sort of spiral out. And there we go. We have an image. And if we were to hit Shift S, or by going to image and then save, Shift S, you would actually be able to save it as like a PNG or a JPEG. Very simple, right? So it doesn't look very good. Doesn't look very good at all. It's very white. Looks like it's made of clay. So we'll do the materials in the next video. But for this one, yeah, just wanted to set the camera up, get the light somewhat in an appealing way. I do have like lighting is such a complex, well, it's not, you can get the basics, like basics is pretty easy, but understanding how light works, I've got like a full series on that. I'll put a link to that in the description and you can click up there if you want to watch it now, but it's more for like once you've got the basics of Blender, you can watch that, but it'll explain all about like fall off, the inverse square law and all that kind of thing. But for now, I want you to know is like, you'll see that it's pretty clear that there's light that's very close to the donut. Like it's kind of like a highlight over here. And then towards the right-hand side, you've got like, it's darker. If you want to have like even lighting over everything, you basically need to move the lamp further away from your subject. And then there will be less fall off. It'll be like, it'll appear more constant, almost like sunlight, which in this case might be kind of desirable. We want to have just kind of like evenly flat lighting across a counter. So I'm moving it, that far. You don't have to copy my exact settings. Like just, it actually, you'll learn more by doing things on your own and like experimenting with how things look, right? So I'm moving my lighting over there. When you move it away, obviously the lighting intensity is reduced because it's falling off. So the brightness of it is defined by the power. So you can increase the brightness right there. And I'll go with something like that. And then as a way to get into the next video, because we're going to start talking about materials, with my plane here selected, I'm going to go to the material setting right down there, the material panel. I'm going to click that. You won't see this, by the way, that's an add-on that I've got enabled. I should probably turn that off. But at the top, so this is material. This is where you define what colors things are going to look, textures, all that kind of thing. So with my plane selected, I'm going to click new to give it a new material. Nothing's changed so far because it's just the default setting. But the one setting here that we're going to change just in this video, base color. I'm going to make this blue. like so. And there we go. We now have a donut sitting on a blue plane, and I'm going to go ahead and hit render like so. There we go. And then let's go save it if you wanted to. By the way, I haven't even talked about saving your scene in Blender yet. So just go save as and save your scene, your .blend file. It's pretty simple, but I know like ZBrush make things pretty hard when it comes to saving, but Blender is pretty easy. It's just like save. But that's separate to the image, which I was talking about. Save the project of the blend. Anyways, hope you learned something from this video. Go ahead and join me in the next video, and we are going to be making the icing look pink, the donut look yellow, and getting into the materials. So I will see you in that video. All right, well, congratulations on making it thus far into the tutorial. The mesh of the donut, like its shape, is pretty well finished. Now we can start talking about this tutorial series is brought to you by and donut, and then doing a final render. At least final for level 1 to create just a nice little cute squishy pink donut. So with our icing selected, I'm going to the materials panel and I'm going to add a new material. So we just touched briefly on it before, but this is where you change the properties for a material. And there are a lot of properties, and it can be extremely daunting, I know, as a beginner to like see all this and go like, oh my goodness, how am I gonna, the good news is you don't need to know most of this. Like, especially as a beginner, there's only like 2 or 3 things you change a lot. Like even myself, I like to think of, oh, here we go, Spider Utility, thank you, nice reminder again. I like to think I know Blender, but I barely ever touch like anisotropic, sheen, clear coat, transmission mode. Like I barely touch most of this. There's really only like 2 or 3 you touch a lot. So the first one is base color, which is the base color of a material. That's the easiest way to say it. It's material can get very sciencey, but it's the albedo side of a material. It's like the underlying. There's no way to explain it. It's the base color, okay? It doesn't affect the reflection color. It doesn't affect bump. It doesn't do anything like that. All it is just like the underlying color of a material. So we're going to make it look pink or whatever, I'm not here to tell you what your donut should look like. You could give it blue icing, purple icing, orange icing, yellow icing. It's entirely up to you. But I happen to think that pink icing looks kind of nice, looks kind of delicious. So there we go. All right. Now the second property that you change a lot for materials is the roughness. The roughness defines how reflective the material looks or how sharp the reflection actually looks. So the lower value you go, like if you go all the way to 0, it's almost like it's a mirror. It's completely sharp. And then as you go higher and higher, you can see that reflection of the lamp there becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you go all the way to 1, it looks almost as if it's made of chalk. And this is how you define how reflective something looks. Some people, especially a lot of beginners, they think that the way to turn off a reflection is to change the specular value. And you can do that, but it's overriding the actual like physically accurate properties of the real world, because every object in the real world actually has reflection. Sounds crazy, but even a brick, even chalk, everything has reflection. It's so rough that you almost can't see it, but it's still there. So I would suggest not touching specular or specular tin or anything like that. I would suggest just leave it as is, and just change the roughness. And if you want to turn off reflection, just crank it all the way up to 1. Anyways, in our case though, we're making this look like icing. It helps to have a reference of icing. So I actually went and bought a donut from the shops, And I put it on a plate here and I filmed it for you so you can see how reflective the icing looks. The more melted it looks, like the fresher out of the oven and freshly glazed, it's gonna look wet, right? So that would be like a low sharp value there. But I find like a value of about like 0.3, 0.34, something like that. I think looks kind of good. I think it looks fine. Fine. Uh, Okay, so there's that, and then for most materials, the only other value that you change a lot is like the normal value, because that's the bump. So if you're adding like a bumpy sort of surface or something, you would change that, but you have to have something to plug into it. When we get to more advanced materials in the following levels, we'll talk about that. But for this thing, we don't have any bump. We're just going to leave it as is. Now, because this is icing, icing is actually a kind of a rare type of material in that there is another property to it, and that is called subsurface scattering. So you can see looking at this right now, it does look like icing, but something seems off about it. Like it almost looks like it is too hard, right? It looks like it's almost made of concrete. And the reason for that is that looking at our reference of real icing, light isn't just hitting it and bouncing off it, light's actually entering into it and it's bouncing around. And that is very much similar to human skin. So real human skin, it has, you can see it especially like on like the corners of people's ears, right? Like with the sun behind them, you see like red ears. And that's because it's like almost slightly translucent and light is entering into the skin and it's bouncing around and you get different values. Well, food actually has this property as well. So humans have it, some natural materials and like food basically has this property. So that's this value here, subsurface scattering. So if we increase this, you can see that it starts to, I mean, it looks different, it looks a little weird, but it has that kind of fleshy quality to it. So the one value that you want to change is the color of this. By default, it's set to white. So we could set this to a pinkish reddish color. It Actually, there's very little information online about how to actually use subsurface color. It's a little, it's kind of like a little out in the open, but based on my tests, I find like giving it like a kind of a reddish pink color is good. But then also you've got subsurface radius, which defines how far the light actually bounces around inside the object. And by default, and here's the other thing, there's 3 values, not just one value, but 3, because there's one for each channel: red value, green value, and blue value, which is weird to me. I don't get it. I'm sure there's a very scientific, accurate reason. But anyways, my advice for you, because the top one is the red value, I would suggest setting that to like a 0.3 and then setting these others to 0.1. The green and the blue, and then that will give it like a reddish tint to it, and it'll go like, it won't go too far as well. You don't want it to look like wax, which is what can happen if you overdo the subsurface value. So actually that does kind of look a little odd to me. 0.25 perhaps. Maybe this is a little bit too something. I don't know. We can tweak these values after. We don't have to be like locked into it right now. But somehow this is looking a little odd to me. I know I went with like 0.3 for my final one. But yeah, this. Maybe I'll go 0.15 for these other 2 values as well. That looks a little bit better. Just a little bit more spread, a little bit more light coming through the donut. You know, you can tweak these all day. 0.3, yeah, there we go, a little bit redder. Nice, okay. Okay, so that's the icing. The icing looks pretty darned good. In the next part, we're gonna put sprinkles on top, but for now, we have some icing, not bad. All right, now, for my, by the way, I've been turning on and off this overlays. That's just like, you know, the camera, like the outline of selected objects. If I'm working on materials and things like that, I find it helpful to just turn it off so that I can just focus on what I'm doing. But then in order to see what you're selecting, of course, you want to make sure you have it turned on. But anyways, I have my donut selected now. So let's give the donut a material. We are in the future parts. We're going to give this a proper material, like texture paint it and make it look parts that are like white as well as dark. But just for now, we're going to give it the simplest material just to make like a really quick render. And that's just to make it look a little bit bready, a little bit orangey yellow, like so. And then the other thing, I'll give it a little bit of subsurf, just a little bit, because it is food as well. So bread has light enter into it, just a little bit. And I'll just make sure it's yellow. And then let's go 0.1. Like so. All right. Donut is looking donutty. So with my camera selected, it's a little far away from my donut. So I'm going to hit G to move my camera, and that'll move it along, you know, like I'm grabbing it. And then I'm going G and then middle mouse button. And then that'll just like, you just push the middle mouse once and it's like moving it along. It's like forward front facing axis. I don't know, but it's just how you move it forward and back. What's the term? It's like on a rail in not pan. Oh, dolly. That's the word I'm thinking of for cameras. It's like dollying it in and out. Anyway. Okay, cool. So we're going to do a little render. So obviously for the final, whatever you call it, final, all the way to level 4, we're going to put like brick behind it, do a coffee, a plate, and all that kind of thing. But just for now, we're just going to make a nice, very simple render for people that want to end it right here. End it all, end it like they're going to commit suicide. This was the last thing you were going to watch. And then that inspired you. All right, that's a little dark. Anyway, in this case, what I want to do is I want to have the light just a little bit behind the donut. But this is a case where you can kind of see like having like just a single view like this, like looking through my camera, I want to be able to move my light around, but I can't really do it from this view. So let's talk about splitting the view. To split the view in Blender, you just go up to wherever there's a border and then just right click it, and then you've got an option to vertical split or horizontal split. By the way, I believe this is a 2.81 feature because that's the version I'm using right now. If you're following along with me, you might just have a like join or something like that. Like you might have to go to the like this side and do it there. But anyways, so we do a vertical split and then we have a split. And then over here, I now have just another window and I can move this around and you can see that it's interactively updating that one at the same time, which is nice. There we go. The other way, by the way, if you want to collapse or split something again, if you move to the very top right-hand corner, this is kind of like the legacy way of doing it. But like your cursor changes to like a little target symbol. If you click and drag that way, it splits it, and you can do it this way as well. And then if you want to join them, like collapse them, you just do it in the opposite direction. Click and drag that way. So yeah, that's pretty good. The only other thing I'm going to do as well is like the size of my lamp there. It looks a little bit like, sorry, I'm going to split the view again so that we can actually see the lamp. It looks a little bit like sunlight, like it looks a little bit too hard of light source. So I'm going to, whoops, not the power, the size of my light right there. You can see the larger I make this, the softer this shadow becomes. If I turn off my overlay, I can focus on a little bit better. You don't want to go too soft because then it kind of like loses emphasis or direction, but just something that's not looking like sunlight, something like that. And I'll turn down the power just slightly. Oh, by the way, now that we're talking, about doing a final render, in my full lighting series, which if you do get serious about CG, I recommend watching that because I go into a lot of detail about this. But I explain how you can actually find out what the correct light value you should be using, because every monitor is actually different, and what looks okay to you might look too dark or too bright for somebody else. So if you don't have that thing that's been popping up repeatedly as the spider, I've got this device which will like make my monitor more accurate for color. But if you don't have one of those, because you don't need it, if you switch in the render settings right here, you've got a underneath color management, you've got a view transform. If you change that to false color, everything will look psychedelic. But these values here will tell you whether something is overly bright or not. And really you want things to be at just above, like just on gray or above gray. So this like top of this icing here is kind of like what my focus is gonna be. So looking at my lamp, I'm just gonna turn that down just a little bit. Like it can be a little bit overexposed. This green value here can be a little bit overexposed, but not too much. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough for now. And then before I do another render, I'll just, because I actually think that blue for the ground, it looks okay. But I actually realized that you can use, if you make it like within this pink pastel color. We did split testing for this tutorial. We put some adverts up on Facebook to test, you know, what thumbnail would actually perform best for this tutorial. And yeah, apparently we did like some different ones with like the background here, and we had ones that were blue and then some that were pink, and the pinks outperformed by a lot. So yeah, I guess like it's up. Up to you, but based on my test, it seems like the aesthetic looks it looks nicer when you have like just pink on pink. So that's what I'm gonna go with. All right, now before we do a render, I'm gonna give this a save. Let's give this a save right now. I just hit Control-Shift-S to do that save. And all right, now if we hit F12 right now, which is the shortcut for rendering, you'll see these tiles will appear. It'll go one by one by one. And yeah, so I do have 2 tiles because I have 2 graphics cards and I'm using the GPU. If you have CPU, you might see like 8 tiles because it's going to use the cores of the CPU to do it. But CPUs are often generally slower than graphics cards. But anyways, so the speed at which it's doing this is dependent on the number of samples. So the samples are defined right here. So the viewport is set to 32 by default. So you can see in the viewport here, it's quite noisy because we're rendering at just 32 samples, which is a very, very low sample amount. The final render, it's doing at 128, which you can see is far less noisy. But when you zoom right in, you can still see there's quite a lot of noise there. So one way to reduce that is to just increase that. But every time, like if you were to double the samples and make it 256, right? 256 samples, that would kind of like double the render time. And you can do that, but yeah, you wouldn't ever even really clear up all the noise. There would always be like some noise there. Thankfully, there is something called denoisers, which after the render is finished, it can try to intelligently read where the, oh, there it is, where the edges are and where noise is, and try to remove the noise. And 2.8, Blender 2.8, so if you're watching this as I upload it, make sure you get this latest version from the Blender Builder website. Blender 2.81 has a denoiser in it, which is incredible. It's the Intel AI denoiser. And the way you use it is you go to your layer panel first, and you make sure you turn on denoising data. And then when you do that, you have to do another render. So we'll do that quickly. There we go. And then once the render is finished, we're going to go, and this is, you know, for a beginner tutorial, it's a little advanced, but we're going to go to the compositor. So this compositor tab along the top there. And this is, yeah, it's everything that's going to happen to your render after a render is finished. And what you can do in here is you could add in nodes that do things. You could add glow. glare. You can do all sorts of things. Color grading, everything can happen in here. And yeah, it's a little advanced, but just follow me for just this part, and later on in the future levels, we'll talk more about using nodes properly. But just for this, it's really simple to do. We're going to hit Shift A, same hotkey as the viewport, and we're going to add in a denoiser node. Since this is so new, I actually just realized I don't even know which menu it's under, but you can do a search. You can type in denoise. So with this, all we need to do is take the output of the noisy image, put that into the image part, the denoising normal, the purple goes in the purple, and then the denoising albedo goes into the albedo. And then we take that and we put that into the composite input right there. Now, when we do that, if we were to hit F11, F11, by the way, is the hotkey to bring up the old render, the most recent render. Nothing has actually changed because when you're doing, I don't know why they changed this in Blender, but it really annoyed me. Like, it won't actually affect the final render unless it's viewable as you're using the compositor. You could do another render right now and it would actually kick into gear. But in order, like if I don't want to have to do another render, I can just go to the image editor down here, set this to render result. And then if I take this out and put this back in, it will actually refresh it, do the full render. And now control space, by the way, will maximize any view that your mouse is over. So control space. Bring that up, and now as we zoom in, you can see it's cleared up all that noise as if it were magic. And it's really, really powerful, this Intel denoiser. And as far as I know, it will work on even AMD processors, as far as I know. Maybe that'll change in the future. I don't know when Intel catches on to what the AMD users are up to. But it's really, really super impressive. Blender had a denoiser previously, and it did it quite immediate. Like it was easier to use, but it was really like didn't do anywhere near as good a result as this. So yeah. There we go, guys. So that is the end of level 1. You made it. Yay! So, thank you for watching. Go ahead and share it with your friends if you found this helpful and help them get into Blender. But I hope you will continue the rest of this series as we add in sprinkles. We'll learn about particles. We'll learn about displacement, making the donut look more like textured bumpy donuts, adding in bumps, as well as texture painting on textures, and then doing precise modeling for the coffee cup, and then final renders and animation as well to the end. So it's a big series, and it's designed to give you that full scope of what you're going to need to know in Blender. So I hope you will join me in the next level. Go ahead and click here if you're ready to. Welcome to the next echelon.